So, welcome. Today I have Cheryl Corson with us. She is many things, and with Rooted in Sound, she's going to be doing some cosmic coaching. It's a relationship of coaching and astrology. First off, Cheryl, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you, Wyatt. And I'm excited to be part of Rooted in Sound in this capacity. I am, as you said, many things. I'm a retired landscape architect in private practice. And toward the end of my landscape career, I went back to grad school at the Maryland University of Integrative Health for a year of graduate training in health and wellness coaching. And it was wonderful. In the intervening years with life changes and COVID, the coaching practice evolved. And what has emerged is that my 40 plus years study and love of astrology has now blended with my training in coaching to provide work with clients that's deeply committed to the coaching model while using astrology as a kind of armature, as a framework to guide discussions and identify overarching themes in people's evolution. And the blending of the two finally feels like the perfect home for how I want to serve people now in this part of my life.
Yeah, I remember going to astrologers before, and the astrologer would be like, well, for instance, one told me that I would meet someone on a certain date, and then on another date that we would be married, and by the third date, if I'm not with them permanently, that I'll never find anybody. So it was like, and then, other astrologers I've had that I consider good, but it was more, it was very much like predictive.
Predictive, right.
And I'm curious what really separates the cosmic coaching from that style of astrology.
Right. It's the most important question because of how astrology itself is evolving, is evolving. In the ancient days, the king would want to know, should I send the army on this date? Will I have an heir? The astrology was very much a predictive function that was reserved for royalty. And as it came through the centuries, the predictive aspect took precedence over many other things. In the 70s, I would say, at least, the personal psychological model became much more integrated with astrology, and yet there remained what the astrologer Eric Myers calls the goodism and the badism of astrology. Oh, you not only the prediction, but if you don't meet your beloved on this date, you're never gonna again. And the coaching model married to the astrology model assumes that you're in the driver's seat here, your hands are on the wheel, and your ability to steer in the direction that you choose is able to be facilitated by the astrology, but not driven by the astrology. You are in the driver's seat. I too have had unfortunate astrology readings having to do with past life astrology. The very first reading I ever had, an astrologer told me that in my past life I was captain of a ship and I let the ship go down and everyone died. not good astrology.
Right, right.
Not good astrology and not good psychology and certainly not good coaching. So in the, even without the coaching model, but any psychological training is important to be a good astrologer. You can't just follow the map of the planets and think you know how to conduct a productive, transformative, motivational interview with a client. You have to have some training for that. Whatever kind of training it is. There's a lot of good astrologers that have psychology degrees, for example. I have a graduate coaching degree, and it was certified, nationally as a coach. So the astrology can point an individual in a direction that will facilitate their growth and development. And the astrologer's job is to highlight those elements to the client, both as when they were born and also as time goes by, because everything is always changing, just as we do, and the planets are always moving and changing, and our relationship with everything too. So it becomes very dynamic and transformative and empowering to the client when done in that way.
I remember when we did some, you did a reading with me and looked at what was going on energetically. One, it reminded me of a teacher in India. I think it was Yogi Nanda, but it might have been someone else. But his quote was that astrology are the natural forces around us, yet we as human beings are meant to elevate beyond those, right?
Yeah.
That we don't just fall prey to the forces,
No.
that we elevate ourselves above. But it can understand what we might be struggling with. And I remember that it felt more like my reading or the charts was much more descriptive than prescriptive.
Yeah.
That it was very much helping me understand kind of who I was and presented in a way that allowed me to define what my goals going forward may be.
Right. We choose. We all have filters of one kind or another, astrology aside, but definitely the astrology is capable of showing us where and what the nature of the filters that we carry with us, so that we understand our tendencies, let's say to over-intellectualize or to feel so much that we can't distance ourselves from our emotions in order to put some intellect to it. We all have various filters. Take action, act first, think later, or overthink everything and never act. We all have various tendencies. And when we know what those are, I think astrology is great at doing that. We understand how to leverage the strengths and how to interact with the filters so that we can overcome them and use whatever cautionary information they have to show us.
Yeah, I remember, all of us have so many different compartments or aspects, to our lives.
Right.
There's our professional life, there's our love life, there's our personal life, there's our home life, there's, our physical being, our spiritual being.
Life.
Right. And, we get fixated on one particular aspect. For instance, I remember in our last reading, my mind was very much geared towards professional.
Right.
And and the reading from last year was very much in alignment with that. But when we looked at the transits this year, even though my mind was really centered on that professional life, you know, you pointed out that all my planets were down at the bottom of the graph, which was my home life and my personal life. And that helped me shift perspective and also focus on another aspect of my life that I could be working on.
Right. The beauty of the astrology is that the planets are always moving, and in relation to the sort of cosmic fingerprint that occurs at the moment of our birth when we take our first breath, which is our natal chart, that the planets today are doing a dance all around that, and the interaction between your natal placements and the current skies will inform where the juice is, where the energy is, where you might get the most bang for the buck in the amount of energy, time, resources that you have at any given moment. And I remember we had that conversation, and I think as a result, you made a decision to attend an event that was not business related, not strictly business related, and that it was something that might have, while it might have business implications, was really just for your personal growth. And I think the astrology in that discussion kind of gave you permission to go in that direction and not think that you were playing hooky from your work.
Or also, you know, without that reading, I may have went into that completely with the scope of what am I learning and how can I apply this to what I'm going to be doing professionally, instead of how can I apply this to my personal life.
Yeah. And I'll say, because we're having this discussion, we're talking about your chart because we're doing this. If you were any other client, I would not be talking about your chart, you know, for the masses. But it's a great example of using not just a natal chart reading, which provides the sort of blueprint of what you came in with, but subsequent readings that help to update how things are shaping up, you know, let's say 4 months, 6 months out, so that you can look ahead and kind of marshal your energies in a good way. Sometimes a cautionary dynamic might cause maybe delaying a decision of, you know, some big life decision or choice. I know when I was engaged to be married, I consulted my then astrologer to see what would be a good time for the wedding. And we located a date that was on the right day of the week and all of this, where the sun and the moon were conjunct. It was a new moon, so that essentially the masculine principle and the feminine principle were united in the skies, that would kind of shine a blessing upon a marital union at that moment. It was a good example of, you know, kind of mundane astrology, but something that can have lasting effects.
Yeah, and I also remember that in the while we were doing my chart, there were certain timelines or certain, I don't want to say dates, but
there are.
Yeah. There was certain seasons coming up when that energy was going to be shifting with the planets moving, that were important times either for me to pay attention to, or maybe an important time to check in, because the energy is about to shift, and this is what's going on in my life in this moment, so that I can better understand how to navigate that.
Well, and your point is a good one, and it's important to say the astrology in the world right now is revolutionary. the outer planets are all changing signs, have and will be changing signs kind of as we speak. And we are seeing that revolution and turbulence everywhere. So it's a particularly good time to focus on astrology because these are not just normal times. We are in extremely challenging times, and therefore it becomes a great tool for the individual who's doesn't need to, you don't have to know astrology to get an astrology reading. It can help, but it's not necessary at all. You don't need to know any astrology to get a value from a reading. But because the planets are doing the extreme things that they're doing now, in some cases that they haven't done for 250 years or 160 years, etc., the application of all that to the individual at this moment in history is tremendous and can only help.
And I think that's one of the biggest difference between the cosmic coaching and the astrology is the understanding the application, the understanding how these energies can help us with our current goals, or maybe a redefining of what goals we're focused on. Because again, all of us have other goals in different aspects of our life. And we can very easily get fixated on one aspect of our life and forget about the rest.
And the challenge and the potential benefit of this goes so much farther than, will I meet the love of my life? Can I, go to grad school or start a business or buy a house? Yes, those things are lovely and astrology can help. But the astrology is so big right now, and we as humans who are on any kind of spiritual path are being called upon to up our game so that we can all serve the greater good in a much higher level. And so the potential right now for the cosmic coaching is that, yes, we can benefit from the individual astrology in our individual personal mundane lives, and we can receive a broader vision of what that all can mean in how we serve humanity.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the, when you were describing what your program might look like to me, and you offered that package of the reading with a couple of transits, that was really beautiful, a beautiful way for someone to engage, because they were able to have that initial reading, start to work on what those goals are, and then, in certain periods of time, check in with where those transits are and what's happening, so that they can reevaluate what's happening in their lives.
And that's the perfect blend of the astrology and the coaching model, because when we do coaching, it's not coaching like long-term psychoanalysis that goes on for 10 years. It really is, it has an arc, it has a kind of a goal, a long-term goal, and then some check-ins, at the client's discretion, right? The client's driving the car. And the astrology is perfectly applicable to that model, because you're not looking 3 years out. You really are looking in the sort of 6-12 months out, because our psyches can't absorb, it's too far in the future. But if we have a kind of goal, whatever that might be 6 months or 4 months or 9 months out, we can leverage the astrology in service of persistent and consistent effort toward any goal that we might have.
Yeah. I know that it's not a major aspect of what you do in cosmic coaching, but it was a fun little sidebar that we did, was the astrocartography, being a landscape architect and being so connected to the earth. It was very fun for me just to peek into where those transits were moving, And it was very interesting because for me personally, the astrocartography, where the planets were lining up in the world, were major centers in which I had just been or was planning to be over the
Yeah.
next year. So it
Yeah.
was very powerful just to
Yeah.
kind of take a glance at that.
One of my teachers has been integral to the development of what's called astrocartography, the mapping of the planets. So when we get our natal chart, it's a wheel, it's on a piece of paper, but it's a map. And it's a map of what the sky was when you were born. When you take that map and you overlay it over a map of the world or the country, whatever your interest is, it is a literal map. When you were born, this or that planet was overhead in this or that place. And depending on what planet that is, it has an effect on how you feel when you're in that place, whether it's Pennsylvania or Hawaii or wherever it might be. And it is an aspect of astrology that I am pursuing further study because my teacher is one of those experts in that field. But as a former landscape architects are all about maps. And so it's this amazing blend. This is not just some idea. It's mythologically based, but it's not mythology. It's real. These are real planets. You can go outside and look at them at night, and you can look at them of where they might be over Paris, France, or places that might be a very challenging place for you to go, which I've had that experience in my life. So absolutely, especially for people that are considering relocation for whatever reason, it would be good to know if you're moving to a place that the overriding energy is Pluto, is plutonic, deep change and transformation, or maybe it's a place where Venus reigns and everything is, sunshine and rainbows for a little while, or something in between. So, for example, I moved to the house I currently live in, and almost instantly became involved in a massive, multi-year, extensive renovation, which is now done. But when I checked the astrocartography, by transit, the planet Mars was essentially right over my house. And Mars is action, and that's what happened. And where did all that energy and resources come from? It was as if I was supercharged as soon as I got to that property.
Yeah.
So it does, there's something to it because I've lived it and we've discussed it, and it especially for people that are considering relocation, it can be extremely helpful. Yeah.
So who, in your opinion, is the ideal person to look at the cosmic coaching?
I would say anybody who is prepared to take responsibility for how they learn and grow and move through the world, who would like the extra information that the astrology can offer, whether they want to pursue learning about astrology more or not, doesn't matter. If you're looking for fortune telling, read the newspaper. Mm-hmm. But if you are looking to understand some of your ingrained patterns better, looking to change some maybe deep-seated patterns, maybe you have issues with abandonment or anger or attachment issues, or maybe you're somebody who loses themselves in relationship, or you can do everything for other people but you can't take care of yourself, or you don't take care of yourself. As any of these kinds of issues, your typical coaching issues, astrology in this way we're doing it can be tremendous value.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. And I invite any of you that are interested in learning more about these energies in the universe and what might be pulling you in one direction or another, or pushing, to look into the cosmic coaching. I found it extremely enjoyable and enlightening. And thank you,
Yeah,
Cheryl. Is there anything
you're
you'd like to share
welcome.
with?
Just to say, I do readings live and online, and it works just as well online. The interpersonal connection with the client is established, can be established very quickly and very deeply, even in an online format.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank
Thank
you,
you again.
Wyatt.
And we'll see you all next time.